Chapter 5. Into the Depths. The forest was darker than Mark remembered. The moon, half hidden behind clouds, cast only faint light, and the twisting branches above seemed to reach for one another, forming a canopy that swallowed the sky. The damp earth clung to his boots as he moved deeper, his flashlight cutting through the dense mist. The notebook in his bag felt heavier with each step, as though it wanted to pull him back. Every so often he heard faint noises, the snap of a twig, the rustle of leaves. His rational mind told him it was the wind, perhaps an animal, but the feeling of being watched lingered, gnawing at him. He stopped to catch his breath, leaning against a tree. The air here was colder, tinged with the metallic scent he'd noticed near the mine earlier. He checked the map again, its edges curling from dampness. He was close. Just a few more minutes to the spot, marked with the ominous red circle. A sudden sound snapped him to attention. Footsteps, not his own. Mark turned, his flashlight sweeping through the trees. The beam caught nothing but twisting roots and shifting shadows. Yet the sound persisted, deliberate and slow, as though someone, or something, was following him. "Who's there?" he called out, his voice echoing back through the silent forest. No answer, only the soft crunch of leaves moving closer. Mark didn't wait. He pushed forward, his breath coming in sharp gasps. The path grew steeper, the trees more tangled. His flashlight flickered, its beam weakening with every step. The footsteps behind him seemed to melt into the night, or perhaps he had simply outrun them. Finally, he reached the clearing. The entrance to the mine stood before him, a dark, gaping maw framed by rotting wooden beams. Rusted chains hung limply from posts on either side, their links rattling faintly in the breeze. A faded sign lay on the ground, the words barely legible. "Keep out." Mark hesitated. Every instinct screamed at him to turn back. But he couldn't. Not now. Not after the notes, the whispers, the feeling that he was part of something he didn't yet understand. He stepped closer, his flashlight revealing the first few feet of the tunnel. The walls were jagged, damp, and streaked with mineral deposits that glittered faintly. The air was heavy, thick with the scent of decay. He entered. Inside, the world was different. The air was colder, sharper, and carried an unnatural stillness. Mark's footsteps echoed endlessly, as if the mine were alive and listening. His flashlight revealed rusted tracks, discarded tools, and splintered wooden supports. Deeper into the tunnel, he found another table, much like the one he'd seen earlier. But this one was covered in dust and debris, as though untouched for decades. On it lay a single item, a lantern, its glass cracked but intact. Next to it was a piece of paper, folded neatly in half. Mark hesitated before picking it up. The handwriting was shaky but clear. "It watches you now. Don't look back." The words sent a chill through him. His flashlight flickered again, casting strange, shifting shadows on the walls. He stuffed the note into his bag and moved further into the mine, his steps quicker now. The tunnel began to narrow, the walls closing in around him. The air grew colder, and his breath formed misty clouds. His flashlight finally gave out, plunging him into darkness. For a moment he stood frozen, his heart pounding in his ears. Then he remembered the lantern. He pulled it from the table, striking a match from the small box next to it. The flame caught, casting a dim but steady light around him. The faint glow revealed something new. Symbols carved into the walls. They were intricate, looping designs that seemed to move and shift in the flickering light. Mark traced one with his fingers. The surface was cold and smooth, as though the carvings were newly made. A noise behind him, a low, guttural growl, made him whip around. The lantern shook in his hand, but its light revealed nothing. "Hello?" he called, his voice breaking. No response, just the faint sound of something moving, too far to see but close enough to feel. Mark turned back to the path ahead, his grip tightening on the lantern. The tunnel opened into a wide chamber, its walls glistening with moisture. In the center stood a monolith, tall and dark, its surface covered in the same shifting symbols. At the base of the monolith lay something that made his blood run cold, a pile of personal belongings. Jackets, boots, backpacks, all covered in dust, as though left behind years ago, and among them a familiar item, the red scarf he'd seen in the photograph of Kay. His thoughts were interrupted by a whisper, faint but unmistakable. Mark. He spun around, raising the lantern. In the far corner of the chamber, a figure stood, barely visible in the dim light. Its face was obscured, its body wrapped in shadows. "Who are you?" he demanded, his voice shaking. The figure didn't move, but its whisper came again, louder this time. "Why did you come here?" Mark stepped back, his hand brushing against the monolith. The symbols flared to life, glowing a deep red. The ground beneath him trembled, and the whisper became a roar, filling his head with incomprehensible words. And then, just as suddenly as it started, the noise stopped. The figure was gone, the monolith dark once more. Mark was left alone in the chamber, the air thick with silence. But in his hand, clutched tightly, was something new, a key. He didn't know where it had come from, but he knew one thing. It wasn't over.